All right, it is the Fantasy Finish Line podcast. Today is Wednesday, December 29th, 2021, the last show of the season, Week 17 NFL Fantasy Preview, and it's time to examine your championship lineups. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers. So it is Week 17.
It is Week 17. I am Jason Evans. Across from me here, Mr. David Biggs. And it is Week 17 in the NFL, which means Fantasy Football Championship for the first time being held in Week 17. Insane leagues. There were, of course, insane leagues that used to do them in Week 17, the former final week of the season.
Yeah, and I'm interested in these discussions, and we should definitely have a commissioner podcast at some point, which can also be sort of evergreen content.
I feel like this is the thing that you like to bring up every week that we never end up doing.
Well, let's do one this offseason.
Well, I mean, I'm all for it.
But the concept being,
I am the commissioner after all.
We've been talking in this season, for example, and not to sidetrack us, but just two topics that we could broach for this particular podcast, for example, are perhaps doing point per first down instead of point per reception, and there's many reasons for and against that.
Oh, I'm a big fan of that lately.
You're a fan of the idea of it.
I like the idea of it. I want to see the implementation.
Yeah.
My thought is taking a half point per reception league, making it a full point per first down league would accomplish two things. It would increase the scoring, which I'm always a fan of, and doing it in a reasonable way, and it would assign points to the players that help their team the most.
Yeah, well, I don't want to get too far in the in the weeds on this because I already have like 4 or 5 things swirling around in my head. But it's definitely a topic we should talk about. And the other thing is just talking about the way that people do championships. Because, for example, there are some leagues that do a 2-week championship for the finals to kind of take away a little bit more of that randomness. And that is also an idea that you could do and cut the regular season 1 week shorter, which isn't that big of a deal considering they just extended it another week.
Yeah.
So I would love to be involved in some leagues, maybe some that we start that maybe try some of these different ideas. And definitely we should have a conversation about it in the off season.
For sure. And we'll, I don't know, just try all kinds of new things in fantasy.
Yeah.
So we are drinking this evening Unani, which is a brewery near Chicago. And the name of the beer is, give me some volume there, Dave.
Are you pronouncing it on YouTube?
Yeah.
Fish.
It's Pesh.
It was anticlimactic.
So it's an American wild ale fermented with peaches. And I believe Pesh is actually French for fishing.
Fish.
And not peaches. So I don't know. I don't speak French. Maybe somebody can chime in and tell me that I'm wrong.
I have a whole side of my family that all speaks fluent French, so I'll ask him.
Okay, perfect. And then we also have the New Glarus Fat Squirrel, which is a nut brown ale.
Yeah.
I'm drinking that right now. And what do you got over there?
I have a Spotted Cow Ale, also from New Glarus from Wisconsin. And a local beer here from a brewery in Algonquin, and Scorched Earth, called Asteroid Juice.
Asteroid Juice.
So, we have a variety of beers. And for our last show this season, I'm going to try and finish up all the beers on the table.
That is a noble goal.
Thank you.
Don't drink my beer, though.
Okay.
If you're expanding your reach to everything on the table, then I may need to move this out of your reach.
I'll let you go ahead and you can have what's in your own glass.
All right. So it is Week 17 in the NFL. It is championship time. Maybe you're playing for a consolation third place prize. Hopefully your league is still good enough to give out some money or at least something for third place. So you've got something to play for in that case. So today we're going to do the usual, go around the NFL, talk about some stuff, and then we're mostly going to go over lineup decisions and maybe some players to acquire for Week 17. So if you're listening to us live, please get those questions in. We want to answer as many of those as we can in order to, help everybody get an idea of either or questions, because that's all you're going to be thinking about all week long. There's no Thursday game. So you got to wait till Sunday to play football, and I think that's a good thing. I wish that all of the championship weeks could eliminate the stupid Thursday night game. You don't have to worry about the question about, should I start a player on Thursday because they're borderline, but do I need to count Thursday against them?
This guy is so worried about Thursday, and in fact, when we've seen stats come up, the actual analysis proves that Thursday night games aren't actually any worse than regular.
I know,
games.
but fantasy football is about feel, and what I feel that I should start is not players on Thursday unless they're named like Jonathan Taylor.
Well, then I was going to say the next year you definitely don't have to start players like Tyreek Hill, Jonathan Taylor, or Dalvin Cook against me on
Maybe
Thursday.
a Travis Kelce. I'll go ahead with those guys.
He's like tight ends on Thursdays.
I don't worry so much about them.
It's tight end Thursday.
Okay.
But don't start studs on
Doesn't
Thursday.
tight end Tuesday like rhyme better?
Yeah, but Taco already kind of fills that out.
Yeah, we don't have Taco Thursday.
Yeah, but Taco is somewhat related to fantasy football.
In what way?
Vis-a-vis the league.
Ah, yes. Every league has its own taco.
That's right.
And if you don't know who it is, that means you're the taco.
And you should go watch the league.
Yes, everyone should watch.
Or at least
some
the
of
first
league.
season of the league.
The first season or two are excellent.
Uh-huh.
Just remember who Ched Johnson is before he was Ocho Cinco.
That's right.
Okay, Dave, why don't you take us around the NFL? Let us know what's up.
Will do. And as Jason was mentioning, of course, we have all our content on drinkfive.com, and please subscribe to our podcast and all of the videos here on YouTube. If you get a chance, you can just search for Drink 5. We would greatly appreciate it. If you're listening on another channel like Spotify or Stitcher or Apple Podcasts, you can subscribe there as well.
And give us a review.
We appreciate it just the same. Reviews are also fantastic. We have a couple out there on Apple Podcasts right now, and thank you for all those people who have reviewed our podcast. Whether positive or negative, we just want to hear it and get feedback. So around the NFL, the biggest news this particular week is that new COVID protocols were enacted by the NFL based on CDC guidance. And I don't want to get too much in the weeds on this either. But what I do want to mention is for those people who may not understand exactly what that means, those players, whether vaccinated or unvaccinated, can again play after 5 days. Now, that's 5 days since the initial positive swab that they've had. There has to be at least 24 hours since the last fever. Other symptoms like cough or sneezes, etc., have to be resolved or improved. As we were talking earlier, a lot of this is somewhat subjective. But what really matters is that the league is now viewing it in the way that the CDC is, and they're pretty much the fastest adopters of this of anybody because they're interested in playing these games.
That's very true. I mean, it's definitely the case that a lot of businesses are going to not have the motivation to adopt it as quickly as the CDC.
Yeah, they're like,
the
let's get it
NFL
out.
was like, I mean, for all we know, Roger Goodell was calling the CDC saying, can we make some changes here?
No, come on.
Not saying that he can, but he's totally the kind of guy who would try.
Sure. So vaccinated players now can test out in less than 5 days, of course, because if they were asymptomatic or whatever, they can still play. The unvaccinated players have to be out at least 5 days after the initial positive test. What this does allow is for previously out players last week, like Mike Williams or Carson Wentz, who are players that otherwise would have been out in Week 17, will now be able to play, assuming that they have passed the guidelines and referendum that is now listed under the guidelines for COVID-19.
It's definitely a lower bar for returning. There was a lot of hoops to jump through. Now there's fewer and they're easier.
And I have to say, I think Jason and I agree with this change, and it's kind of nice that they've been able to implement it so quickly. I bet the people in the NFL corporate halls were running around the halls all crazy for like a week.
As a fantasy football player, I'm happy. I have no opinion of it otherwise because I'm no expert. But, if I want to be an expert in one thing in my life, it's fantasy football. And I know that this is good for fantasy football.
There you go. So we're going to see more players, and we already have seen some that are now active that were previously out or suspected to be out for various reasons for Week 17. Let's turn our attention to Sam Darnold and Trey Lance, who both appear to be in line to start for their respective teams. And Darnold is irrelevant at this point, and who knows if Cam Newton will jump back in or what will happen. But Trey Lance could be worth a start this week, and we're going to talk a little bit more about him later on the show. Elijah Mitchell could be back for the 49ers. How will Trey Lance filling in for the injured Garoppolo affect Mitchell's fantasy production? Well, again, we'll talk a little bit about that later. But Jason, what do you think about Elijah Mitchell, who has done so well? Is he going to be someone that you would start if you had on your squad right now? And certainly, I think we both agree that Jeff Wilson is not a startable guy on your roster if Elijah Mitchell is in the lineup.
To that latter statement, I completely agree with you. The question being then, will you see a split or will you see a majority Elijah Mitchell? And I do believe that what we'll wind up seeing is majority Elijah Mitchell. So they play Houston this week. Houston's giving up the 6th most points to opposing running backs.
Sure.
Just to give you an idea of what they've done in the last 3 weeks, 26.3 points to Rashad Penny in Week 14, 16.3 to James Robinson in Week 15, and 30.2 to Justin Jackson.
So it sounds like a positive.
So start Elijah Mitchell.
Positive
if he's
game
playing.
script for Elijah.
As long as there's not whispers of he'll be splitting or he's not all the way healthy yet. Like if he's practicing on Thursday, Friday in regular practice mode, then full speed ahead with him. I definitely want to remind everyone, keep an eye on when people practice because it's only Wednesday when we're recording this. Wednesday is generally the first time that we receive any type of injury information on any players. And a lot of players will sit out due to being a veteran and they just need some rest, stuff like that. Or they're being slowly brought back in after an injury like Elijah Mitchell. So as long as he practices, not even in full necessarily Thursday and Friday, but is stacking those consecutive days at practice. That's the most important thing. And I think that if that is the case, you definitely want to start him because Houston is hot garbage when it comes to defending running backs.
Yeah, I think that's very succinct. I personally have Elijah Mitchell up in the rankings right now, but he will maybe even climb higher up there as soon as we have some more information about him actually starting. Because as of now, he is not actually starting and in the roster. He is just practicing.
Well, he wasn't on the IR, right?
No, but he's practicing in a limited fashion.
Right, and I don't think he was practicing at all last week, so
Right.
it's a good trend.
Yeah,
or it's the beginning of a trend.
We're looking at Thursday to really open our eyes at some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Jared Goff with a knee injury, Lamar Jackson with an ankle, and James Conner with a heel injury are all still up in the air. Have a decent chance at starting. So again, pay attention to reports throughout the week. That's the most important thing that you can do. If you have those guys on your roster, Lamar Jackson may start. Jared Goff, we're going to talk about a little bit later as well. And James Conner, that's a tough one because you have Edmonds, who did a really good job last week. If there is only one running back in the Arizona offense, they're going to put forth a lot of fantasy production.
Yeah.
When they're both splitting, as we saw earlier in the season, we tend to downgrade them. But if they have a 1A, 1B relationship, or if there's only one or the other, then they do really well in that offense.
And they're playing Dallas this week. Dallas's defense is playing out of their minds. And if it's a split situation in Arizona, you probably want to avoid it. And as far as the players that we listed there, Goff, Lamar Jackson, and James Conner, I would say those are in order of how likely, at least I think, that they'll actually start. I think Goff has a good chance. Lamar Jackson feels like a coin flip at this point, and James Conner feels like the least likely of the three to start. But, this is what we know as of 9:14 p.m. on Wednesday night.
Adam Thielen with ankle surgery is out for the season, and Dalvin Cook has been activated for the Vikings. So for the Vikings, more of the same for Jefferson and Cook. I don't know if Kirk Cousins will have a good game or bad. That's traditionally been very difficult to tell based on the game script and everything else. But Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook are healthy and playing, and those guys are starting on your roster unless you're insane.
Well, let me see here. Kirk Cousins playing a very familiar opponent in the Green Bay Packers. He has played 8 games against the Packers. He is 4-3-1 with 18 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, 224 yards total. That would accounts for 281 yards per game. So I definitely like Kirk Cousins historically against Green Bay. And as a owner of Justin Jefferson in a league where I'm in a championship, Big fan.
Yeah, especially with Adam Thielen out now for the whole season, and you've definitely got an in-division opponent that they're familiar with. It's not like this is a team that they're, trying to come up with ideas on how to attack.
And the Packers defense really still has nightmares probably of what Dalvin Cook did to them last year. So with him back, that means that all this extra safety help for the Packers is going to have to mostly focus on Dalvin Cook, and that'll leave Justin Jefferson not single covered in any means. And I mean, I don't even know if they play zone or man, to be honest with you, but it's less likely that there'll be that extra guy around to cover Justin Jefferson because of the Dalvin Cook factor. So even though Adam Thielen is gone, that doesn't necessarily mean that Justin Jefferson will get all this extra attention.
Yeah, but you're starting Justin Jefferson on your team.
No matter what. I mean, he's a top 5 wide receiver.
Yep. Darren Waller put on the IR list now. He's out for the season. His fill-in Foster Monroe led the Raiders in receiving last week, but he's only averaging just above 7 points per game. Now, a lot of that has to do with touchdowns and red zone looks, etc. But the concept here is that people thought that if they just slotted in Foster Moreau a couple weeks ago, that they would get the same kind of production that Darren Waller was getting. Now, there's 2 reasons that that's a bad idea. The first reason is that Darren Waller actually hasn't been doing that well this year because he's been double covered by the defensive schemes, who have realized that he is maybe the biggest threat that the Raiders have to offer. The second reason is that Foster Moreau is not as good as Darren Waller. And so
not even close.
Because of that, it's someone to think about if you have absolutely no other options on your tight end list. And we'll talk about CJ Uzomah, for example, later in the podcast. But if you can help it, if there's someone that has more upside, then Foster is probably not the guy for you to play, because an average of 7 points for that position is simply not enough for you to reach out, pay FAAB for, try your hardest to start. Foster is not the guy for you.
Yeah, if we're looking for a tight end to pick up, there are a few guys. We'll talk about Uzomah later, but one guy that didn't make our list, but is only owned in 48% of flea flicker leagues, is Gerald Everett, who has an average of 10.87 points over the last 3 games. And he is definitely not a target hog, but he's doing a lot with those targets. And a lot of that's because of touchdowns. He's a bit touchdown dependent.
Well, there you go. There's an upside player.
Yeah.
If you have a touchdown as a tight end, Everett, for example, then you're probably scoring more points than both Foster and Uzomah. But if you don't get the touchdown, you might have 1.7 points.
He had week 13 negative 1.3.
That's not a good performance.
That's not what you need in the fantasy playoffs. But
it's not turning out good numbers.
In the last 7 weeks, he has 3 double-digit performances. We're talking about scraping the waiver wire. So there's not going to be much better than that you're going to find.
It sounds like you're looking to start Everett on one of your teams.
I'm considering it, and we'll get to that. We're going to talk about the teams that we have in either championship or consolation third place games and the decisions we have. And I actually didn't write this one down. I'm going to write it down real quick while you talk about the next thing.
Well, you write it down on pencil and paper, and I will move on to the next item.
Yes, please.
This guy's got a notepad over there. Miles.
I am the kind of guy that would write all that down on paper.
Miles Sanders, who has a broken hand, is out for week 17. And for a guy who catches a lot of passes in the backfield, a broken hand is just not going to do it for you, Miles. More on his replacements later in the show.
He also has to carry the football, so
yeah, that's okay.
That's a thing.
You
too.
Just shove it against the body a little bit.
Yeah.
Deandre Swift should be back this week for the first time since he was injured in week 12. In weeks 10 and 11, he had 130 and 136 rushing yards, respectively. So another great option right there. Although I have heard some people whispering on Twitter about how you should not start Swift this week. Get more on that later. From Ian Rappaport on Twitter, the Chiefs are expected to get tight end Travis Kelce back from the COVID-19 list, and he should practice today. Again, another guy who maybe wouldn't have gotten back so quickly, but Travis Kelce was one of the first people last week to have gone on the list. And so
there was some question as to whether or not he would play this week. Right. And one of my opponents kind of rolled the dice, thinking that he might come back.
Yeah. Well, it looks like he's going to be back.
He rolled snake eyes, to my benefit, but it wasn't an unreasonable thing to do.
Tell me the rules of this dice game.
I'm making them up as I go along.
I think there was news earlier today saying the only player who didn't practice on the Chiefs was. Did you see that?
No, who was it?
I don't know.
Someone completely random that we've never heard of?
Let's roll the dice.
That's not how this game works.
I don't remember, but
You're not following.
You could look it up. But point is, the Chiefs are right now very healthy and all practicing, which is very good. And Tyreek Hill last week, after coming off the COVID list, was apparently pretty sick. Didn't do very well against the Steelers, and the news that came down the pipeline said that he was very exhausted. He was having trouble keeping up with the defense, etc. And that could be maybe just marked down to the fact that he was sick, right?
Right.
Sometimes it's not that hard to figure out.
If you're sick all week, you can't go run sprints on Sunday.
Yeah.
That's and that's what Tyreek Hill does.
And as Jason says, no Thursday night football. So let's rejoice about that and move on to the weekend. Cheers to no more Thursday night football.
No more Thursday night football until next year.
No, I don't really want to cheers because I like Thursday night football. But I get your point.
I'm just really tired of bad Thursday night football.
I get your point. That's a cool song.
Not bad.
The intro might be a little long. So, Jason, let's talk about some lineup decisions. Now, you had mentioned earlier that we were going to talk about tough decisions from your lineup and my lineup, or lineups that are in our championship games that we're going to be playing this week.
Well, I believe you're in 2 championships. Congratulations.
Well, we don't have to get into specific numbers, but yes. Yeah,
I don't want to embarrass you. I'm sorry.
I have 2 championship games. But
nicely done. You're in 35 leagues, so it's good that you made 2.
Not 35. The ratio is better than that.
Okay.
But I'll tell you, first of all, it doesn't really matter how many championship games you get into. If you've played enough fantasy football, you realize that if you're doing well at it, you're going to win championships. And some years you just don't do as well.
Right.
And a lot of that has to do with luck because you've put all your chips on the table, you've done all the research, etc. But I have generally been in a lot of championships, and so have you, every year, and that's a good indicator, really.
I don't think I don't think either of us were in last year,
Well,
and that was a rarity.
Again, these things happen.
But yeah.
But what's important is to keep trying and to keep putting your best step forward and to changing your philosophies to things that actually work out.
If you get very frustrated with it, as we have seen and we have been in the past, take some time away from it. I'm not saying turn off the podcast. I'm saying, remember that it's just a game and that, in a month you're going to want to play fantasy football again.
So let's talk about some of these lineup decisions. And here's one for me. This is in a PPR league, and I have Sony Michel versus Devin Singletary. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this particular decision.
Okay.
So in this league, let me look it up here.
So Sony Michel is playing against the Ravens. They play in Baltimore, and Devin Singletary. The Bills are at home. They are facing. I knew this earlier, and now they're facing the Falcons.
So in this league, I have I have Aaron Jones already playing versus Minnesota.
Yes,
and I have Elijah Mitchell, who could also be involved in this decision.
Okay.
I have Chase Edmonds, who could be involved in this decision, and Devin Singletary. So basically, in the second spot, assuming Aaron Jones is healthy, I'm going to play him in the first spot. Second spot is either Chase Edmonds, Elijah Mitchell, Sony Michel, or Devin Singletary, which gets a little more complicated.
Sure, it's very complicated. That's a lot of players to consider.
Uh-huh.
Off the top of my head, I would say give me Sony Michel because he's in maybe the best offense that you listed, and he is a primary back, like a standout primary back.
So if James Conner was not to play, then perhaps Chase Edmonds would move up there. Devin Singletary, who has been like marked now as the primary back in the Buffalo offense, is another guy who is a possibility. If there is someone that we could maybe rule out, I don't know who that would be. So what would you do if you were in my situation? You do Sony Michel and
I
Aaron
normally
Jones?
do what you're saying is let's start by ruling out players. Who are the two that aren't written down here?
So again, Sony Michel, Elijah Mitchell, Chase
Mitchell.
Edmonds, Devin Singletary.
So I like Mitchell a lot. We talked about him earlier. Houston's giving up the fourth most points against to running backs. Devin Singletary's playing Atlanta. They're giving up the ninth most points. Both of those feel like good matchups, but both of those also feel like games that could be out of the running back's control. So Elijah Mitchell, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, Trey Lance is probably going to start this week. Or did we already talk about it?
Not specifically, but Trey Lance will be the starter over Garoppolo, 95%.
Yeah, he's further down our list to discuss more in depth. But because of that, I may be slightly hesitant when you're looking at all of these options. So, I mean, I would cross off Devin Singletary, and the next one I would probably cross off is Elijah Mitchell.
So Chase Edmonds versus Sony Michel.
Yeah, and Chase Edmonds has a great offense.
So if James Conner doesn't play, you see no issues with Cam Akers. Cam Akers generally just being someone that they expect to come in on a couple downs if he plays at all. And Sony Michel still expected to play the majority of the downs.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm saying that I already know it, but
no, I see it the same way as you. And then what I look at is the Chase Edmonds matchup. He's playing Dallas, and the Sony Michel matchup. They're playing Baltimore. Baltimore's run defense isn't shabby, but Dallas is better. Also, Baltimore is way more likely to give up points, and LA should be able to move the ball well against them,
all right,
which could result in just the easy goal line carries.
So who do you pick for me to start?
I like Sony Michel.
Yeah, I've got him in for right now, so that's agreed upon. Cheers to that. PPR flex, AJ Green, Laquan Treadwell, or Rashad Penny, and that is in a as I said, a PPR
league. So let's see. Obviously, AJ Green, they're playing Dallas. Ooh, I don't want to start anybody against Dallas this week. They're playing so damn well. And AJ Green, last week I told everybody, start AJ Green. He's going to have a huge game.
I remember that.
Did not. I don't know that they are necessarily going to be able to,
So Rashad Penny did really well last week.
As much.
Laquan Treadwell also has been doing well for the past 3 weeks.
He's someone who keeps popping up on my lists of players to acquire.
He was a number 1 draft pick that didn't really play to the capacity that he should. It's possible now in Jacksonville that he's found a spot that's good for him, but unfortunately it's with Jacksonville, which means that the consistency may not be there from the quarterback and the offensive passing schemes.
I agree. So in these questions, it's usually the last spot in your starting lineup is what we're talking about. You're talking about your flex spot. I like to go with matchups in these cases. So AJ Green, as discussed, he's playing Dallas, not a great matchup. Laquan Treadwell, they're playing, I believe, New England. Another just awful matchup for him. And then you've got Rashad Penny. The Seahawks are playing the Lions. So the Lions are playing better, but they are not nearly at the Dallas and New England sort of level at the moment. Plus, Rashad Penny has just been a madman lately. So it is a full PPR league, yes.
Yep.
I don't know that Rashad Penny gets too many catches, but neither of those receivers are 10 catch a game guys. So I think I have to lean Rashad Penny here.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
who did you have slotted in at the moment?
It is difficult for me to make that decision, but currently I have Rashad Penny in.
Okay.
I have Joe Mixon, Sony Michel, and Rashad Penny in on that league.
Yeah, that's a nice setup that you got going on there.
It's working out.
That's nice. There's a reason you're in a championship game there.
That's a dynasty league, so I got those guys for a while.
Very nice.
And then my last decision is Colts versus Chiefs in defensive. Now, this is a league where I play 2 defensive positions each week.
Okay.
In this particular week, I have slotted in the Colts and the Saints. The Saints have a great matchup against Carolina, and the Colts are playing Las Vegas. The Chiefs I also have on my bench, and they've been playing out of their minds. They're going up against Cincinnati, though, who has Joe Burrow, who's been playing out of his mind. So right now I have the Chiefs benched in favor of the Colts. I think the Colts matchup is not bad against Las Vegas, and I'm looking for some affirmation there.
So actually, when it comes to giving up points to opposing DSTs, the Raiders and the Bengals are 11th and 13th, or 13th and 15th.
For the year.
I'll get it right. For the year. So over the last few weeks, Kansas City was able to score 24 points against Oakland. That was 2 weeks ago. As far as Cincinnati goes, they've done pretty well at limiting the opposing defense and special teams. Both teams have been playing a little bit better lately. So I guess you have to go with what team is more turnover prone. And in that case, I would probably lean towards the Raiders because they are not playing for as much as the Bengals, and they I don't even know if Derek Carr has more like picks than Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
So I guess I would go against the Raiders there.
Well, plus what I tend not to do is go against a team that is trending up. Clearly, the Bengals have found some fire, and so I don't know.
And the Colts should be getting Darius Leonard back as well.
Yeah, I like the Colts defense. I currently have them in. So I appreciate your advice, and it's really just backed up what I've already had in my lineup. So
that's the way it goes.
That's great. Why don't you tell us what your lineup decisions are?
Okay, so in a full PPR league, I have another embarrassment of riches like you do at running back position. I'll brag about them for just 1 second. I've got Joe Mixon, Ronald Jones, and Ezekiel Elliott currently slotted in with Rashad Penny on the bench. Now, obviously, with a flex spot, I'm starting all 3. I do not have a worthy wide receiver to take the spot of any of those guys, so it will be 3 running backs here. At the moment, I've got Zeke in. They're going to be playing Arizona, but I really want to find a reason to put Rashad Penny in. So, can I possibly start Rashad Penny over Ezekiel Elliott? Like, I want to be convinced of this, but I just feel like, one of the things you do in the championship game is, don't get too cute and use the guys that got you there. And even though Zeke hasn't had a great year, he's got like 12 touchdowns on the year. He's doing enough.
I 100% think that you should put in Penny instead of Zeke. And Ezekiel Elliott is going to continue to have that limited workload. Also has Tony Pollard on the team, who's going to be slotting in and getting carries. And Rashad Penny, he had 135 rushing yards and a touchdown on 17 carries just recently. He's going against the Lions defense that allows the 3rd most fantasy points per game to the position.
Yeah,
and I just don't see how you can play a fading Elliott over a surging Penny. So
you've got great points there. Plus, Arizona, playing against Elliott, giving up the 7th fewest fantasy points to
they're
the
a better
defense.
Position. It just seems like.
And I believe that Zeke Elliott only had 9 touches last week, 9 carries, 1 reception.
He had 32 fantasy points in his last 2 games. Yeah. And the Cardinals are 11th against fantasy backs over the last 5 weeks. So Elliott still has a chance to get a touchdown or 2.
I mean, he's got 238 points on the year. Like, he's been doing plenty.
Sure.
He certainly hasn't lived up quite to his draft spot.
Well, you know what this is. This is a floor versus ceiling, and it really depends on who you're playing and if they're projected for a lot more points than you, or if you just want to play more conservative and consistent. And it sucks to not play Penny. Like, unless you're in a dynasty league, why do you have him on your roster if you're not going to play him?
Opponent's got Cooper Kupp, Alvin Kamara, Deebo Samuel.
Yeah.
A lot of really high upside
Those guys are going to score 20 to 30 points.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I think I need to probably go with Rashad Penny here. because he's going to get a lot more work than Zeke. And with that alone, he's probably going to have at least as many points.
Certainly possible.
Okay, so we have a question at the chat room. Josh Allen versus Atlanta or Tom Brady versus the Jets? So, I mean, that's a great problem to have. You have two top-notch quarterbacks. I would almost lean Josh Allen because the Jets tend to give up so much on the ground.
Allen's my
that
number
they're
one rated
good
quarterback.
that they're good against quarterbacks.
Brady only has Brown. Brown is slightly injured. They have serious problems right now with their offense. And people are double covering Gronkowski, which means that there's not a lot for them to do.
Yep.
Then Allen does not have that problem. In fact, he has more people coming back.
More Week 17 problems. Stephon Diggs versus Atlanta or Devontae Adams versus Minnesota. I can't ever sit Devontae Adams for the most part.
Yeah, Adams is the
wide receiver.
Adams is the best wide receiver in the NFL.
And the best fantasy football wide receiver.
If there wasn't a Cooper Kupp this year. they're tied. But you can't start Diggs over Adams because although Allen and Diggs connect quite often, there's been many opportunities that have been lost this
Diggs
year.
is frequently not the most targeted or at least the highest number of receptions on his team.
Because
whereas Devontae Adams is that every single week.
Yeah, the opportunities are there for other players on the Bills. They're not there for other players on the Packers. So you have to start Adams. You have to start Allen. But don't start Brady and Diggs or you will lose your championship.
So Rashad Penny versus Detroit or David Montgomery versus the Giants. I think we answered this earlier with our glowing endorsement of Rashad Penny. I would go Penny here. Do you have a reason to want to start David Montgomery instead?
Yes, I think David Montgomery is a much higher rated and higher floor player than Rashad Penny. You must not have Montgomery on any of your fantasy teams.
I certainly don't.
David Montgomery has been very good this year at scoring a lot of fantasy points.
I do my best to ignore everything Chicago Bears.
Well, like him or not, Montgomery is a better option this week than Penny or Ezekiel Elliott or Aaron Jones or Josh Jacobs or any of those guys.
Oh, okay. I mean, you need some good guys there.
He's a top 10 running back for me, and none of those other guys are top 10 running backs.
Okay.
They're high-end RB2s.
I'll defer to your Montgomery knowledge. And the final question here from MJ23, great nickname, and thank you for the question, is George Kittle versus Houston or Mark Andrews versus the Rams? I don't know where you're getting this team from, but it should just waltz right into the championship for the most part. Can you flex one of those guys? I don't know.
No, they're a coin flip.
Yeah, it really does feel like a coin flip. With Kittle, look, if Lamar Jackson plays, you start Andrews. If Lamar Jackson doesn't play, you flip a coin.
I think Kelsey and Kittle are 1 and 2. They have been the whole year. They will continue to be in Dynasty for the next couple of years. Mark Andrews is a number 3, and they are so close. And Andrews' fantasy production depends entirely on the touchdowns, whereas Kittle does not. Kittle can get 150 yards.
Yeah, but Kittle has I would dare say, a lower floor. Because Kittle has a couple of games with like one catch this year.
Well, I don't want to argue that kind of stuff. I'm saying championship game, I would rather have George Kittle than Mark Andrews, but you flip a coin and decide for yourself.
Yeah. This isn't a case where we're going to say go with the higher ceiling. This is so close.
Also, Kittle's playing Houston and Andrews is playing the Rams. One team is better than the other team.
That's true. That's very true.
Now, take that for what you will. I'm not sure.
Okay, a few more of our own lineup questions. I've got Kirk Cousins going to Green Bay and Taysom Hill in Carolina, and then I've also got Tyler Huntley in case Lamar Jackson doesn't play. So obviously Cousins is healthy. Taysom Hill just returned from the COVID list earlier today. But if they all play, who would I lean towards? Who should I go with there? I'm tempted to go Taysom Hill just because of the very high floor of him.
So I like Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. We talked about him earlier. His great stats against Green Bay.
Just play him.
He's in the lineup right now.
Division matchup. He's going to have to throw it. He's going to have to throw it to win. Dalvin Cook is going to get some touchdowns or at least a lot of work. but Justin Jefferson is going to get the ball. It's going to happen.
And then at wide receiver, and this is another full PPR league, Mike Williams versus Denver if he returns. We mentioned earlier that he has a good chance to return. Marquez Valdez-Scantling versus Minnesota. Van Jefferson going to Baltimore. Gabriel Davis versus Atlanta. Rashad Bateman versus the Rams. I think as long as Mike Williams is healthy, I go with him. But if not, I mean, I kind of want to get cute starting MVS, but I think that Van Jefferson might be the smart play there because Baltimore is so bad against wide receivers right now. They are giving up the 5th most points against. Then again, Minnesota's giving up the most points to wide receivers.
Yeah, that's tough. I like Van Jefferson. I think that Mike Williams, at this point, coming back off the COVID list, in a situation where he was already boom or bust, is going to ruin your fantasy team's chances if you start him.
Ooh, I don't like that, Dave.
Start a guy who is more likely to be involved.
It's the truth.
In the game.
It's the truth, but I don't like it.
Do you want a guy who's going to score 25 or 6?
So then would you lean... I mean, with Van Jefferson, you've got Odell Beckham, who's really sort of emerged on that team as the number 2 option now. Would you rather go with a MVS? You're not considering that?
No.
Okay.
We know Marquez Valdez-Scantling. We know how it works in Green Bay. We know that Alan Lazard and Devontae Adams get all of the touches. And
I feel like MVS is kind of above Lazard in the pecking order.
You want to play MVS, then you're going to get a guy who reaches up for a touchdown and almost catches it. or a Williams who gets an 80-yard defensive pass interference but doesn't count for him.
Williams is the kind of guy who has like 2 catches on 7 targets for 75 yards.
Those are not the best decisions.
Look, it's the last spot on the team, obviously.
I like Van Jefferson right now. If there's anyone you can get that's more consistent, then I would go with them.
Like a waiver wire? You think there could possibly be someone on the waiver wire?
I don't know. I guess
there's a Kendrick Bourne.
I guess you could take a look.
There is Cortland Sutton. I would not go with that. Robbie Anderson, Emmanuel Sanders, Marquez Callaway.
Nope, I'd play Van Jefferson.
Yeah, and then otherwise I've got Chase Claypool and Justin Jefferson. So Chase Claypool, I'll probably stick with him. Ugh. Not the greatest. Not the greatest. I don't want to sit here and groan about my team, but I'm in the championship. We'll roll the dice and see what happens.
Well, listen, it's not always that we go over our own lineups. You know, for the year, I think we've only mentioned it a couple times, and I hope that it hasn't been something that has gotten up your nerves listening to the podcast. But I will say this: it's kind of an interesting conversation for us because just like you. We get emotionally invested in the players that we have on our squad.
Right. Sometimes you just need to hear someone talk about it from the outside. There was a couple of like the Zeke Elliott versus Rashad Penny. You didn't have any sort of qualms as to who you would start in that situation.
I don't.
Right. And that gives me pause when I was just like saying, I'm gonna start Zeke, but I want to find a reason to start Penny
because you still think Zeke is your stud.
Right.
But he's not anymore.
He scores a lot of points, but then again, his ceiling is like 17.
You need to sleep on.
He just happens to keep hitting his ceiling lately. And then my very last decision, I have Hunter Henry. I can pick up Gerald Everett. Hunter Henry had such a big week 2 weeks ago, and then had nothing last week. Gerald Everett doesn't get that much work, so he's touchdown dependent. So I feel like Hunter Henry has the higher ceiling right here.
Yeah, I would still go with Henry, but as you said earlier in the program, Everett has been doing very well. So I would say Everett has the higher ceiling right now.
Okay, I feel like Everett's kind of like Zeke, where he's just hitting his ceiling lately.
Henry is touchdown dependent. Everett seems to be
but Henry seems like his ceiling is 25 points. Everett's ceiling is like 13.
Sure, but if you look at targets, based on what you were saying, it seems like the targets are there for Everett over the past couple weeks. But if you discount the really high-scoring game that Hunter Henry had, surely his targets are not at the same level as Everett's.
Yeah, I suppose Everett's at a 4 to 5 target per game, and discounting that game, Henry is at a 2 to 4.
Right. So he's touchdown dependent or big game dependent in mismatches, right? And I like Hunter Henry, but if they're deciding not to go with Hunter Henry in that game, you're going to get 2 targets for 35 yards.
So they played Jacksonville. That's something. Jacksonville, middle of the pack when it comes to giving up points to tight
I have
ends.
Henry at 9 and Everett at 12, and that may change throughout the week. But
Yeah.
I still think that Henry is the guy that will score more points. Probably Everett has maybe the higher floor, but we don't play fantasy for floors.
No, you don't play for floors this week. That's for damn sure.
So you want to have Henry, a guy that's involved, a guy that Mac Jones trusts, a red zone target on the New England Patriots, right?
Yeah, I mean that's all those things are true.
But if you want to go more consistent conservative, then you may want a guy that goes 4 for 57, which is probably an Everett.
Yeah, that's a good way to lose by 10 points this week. So it's fantasy week. It's championship week, man.
Championship.
It's tough. Got to make tough decisions. Ooh, that is a sour beer. Tingles right here.
All right, so now we're on to popular acquisitions and plays for Week 17, talking about those plays that have been picked up off of the waiver wire, and those guys that you may want to start over the incumbent players that you've already had on your roster for a couple of weeks. Jason, if you'll just start us off here, and let's try to go quickly through these guys.
Sure. For once, I didn't write gigantic paragraphs for all of them. So Elijah Moore on the Jets. He's returning. He's been out since, I believe, Week 13. The Jets are playing the Bucs. The Bucs have given up 9 double-digit games to opposing wide receivers since their bye week in Week 9. So Moore has averaged 15 points per game in the last 7 games that he's played, between his bye and going down with injury. So I think that he's definitely, if he's available, he's definitely someone you should pick up just to have around in case, more players have to sit because of COVID later in the week.
Okay.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling, we talked about him a little bit. He's back from the COVID list. He's facing the Vikings. They give up the most points to opposing wide receivers. I think that he slots ahead of Allen Lazard in the pecking order. I think it's a sneaky start, especially if your lineup's blown up. But if you've got a lot of guys to choose from, like maybe a Van Jefferson, I'm coming around to that thought that probably it's not going to be Marquez Valdez-Scantling who does it for you. So again, these are players that you're going to need to have in your back pocket just in case. Maybe not all players that you're going to want to start.
I think your analysis is good, but we all know that any Packers receiver not named Devontae Adams has no guarantees.
None at all. Isaiah McKenzie, wide receiver in Buffalo, only owned in 11% of flea flicker leagues. So he blew up last week. He had 11 catches on 12 targets, 125 yards and a touchdown. The Bills are playing the Falcons this week. They give up the fourth most points to opposing wide receivers, is what I got down here.
It sounds like a question.
I seem to remember seeing them at 5th. I thought you said 3rd earlier. It's not like stats change during the week. I don't know what's going on here.
It depends on where you're looking and what.
I looked it up. I usually use Yahoo's fantasy points against.
They give up a lot of points.
That's a half-point PPR.
They give up a lot of points,
sort of thing. That's the point. They give up a ton of points.
But
to opposing
with Gabriel Davis and Cole Beasley both coming back from the COVID list, is that going to make you not start him?
I would definitely start Gabriel Davis over both of those guys. Isaiah McKenzie maybe next, and then Beasley last.
I feel like all of them are traps because they're all going to be around. Because they've all been good, and so Josh Allen is good at spreading the ball around.
It's true.
And I don't think...
And he's just going to run it anyways.
I don't think you're going to be able to...
So if you have Josh Allen, way to go.
I don't think you're going to be able to pick which one is going to have the game, is all I'm saying.
No, not with any sort of accuracy or predictiveness.
If you can avoid it, don't start one of the little guys that is also on the Bills.
Okay, and I believe I'm going to get this right. Daria Ogunbowale Running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars available in 13%
Sounds good.
of flea flicker leagues, but not in the Drink 5 league because Dave nabbed him this week.
Ogunbowale.
That's a great toast. Ogunbowale will be taking James Robinson's place in the anemic Jaguars offense. They're bad. They really are. However, last week, Ogunbowale had 17 carries, 2 receptions on 4 targets, and there's a lot to be said about volume. It's sort of the point we were making earlier about Rashad Penny versus Ezekiel Elliott. You want the guy who is way more likely to touch the ball 20 times than the guy who's going to touch the ball 10 times and probably not more than 12.
Yeah.
So that's where Ogunbowale's value comes in. He did find the end zone last week, but they're playing the Patriots this week. And if Bill Belichick decides that he's the biggest weapon on the team, then he is not going to do anything this week.
It's so funny on a team on a league that only has 6 bench spots, right? I have 6 running backs. I have Sony Michel, Chase Edmonds, Elijah Mitchell, Jordan Howard, Jeff Wilson, and Daria Ogunbowale.
No way.
Because I don't want other people to have them.
Well, that's true. If your opponent needs, if your opponent is in need of some running backs, then that's fine.
I was like, no.
Here's the reason, ladies and gentlemen, why Dave can roster that many running backs. Here's his wide receiver lineup: Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, Deontay Johnson.
Oh, they've been fine this year.
How many teams is Deontay Johnson like the distant third?
He's the WR3 on my squad.
Oh my God! When did you draft these?
And Travis
Devontae
Kelce.
Adams 1st round,
And Justin
Cooper
Herbert.
Kupp 6th round,
Very good team.
Deontay Johnson 5th round, Travis Kelce 2nd round. Dave, this is the Drink 5 League. This is the one that we want to promote the most.
Good squad.
Kick some ass this week, my friend.
Appreciate it, buddy.
This is a very good squad.
And Nick Folk's the #1 kicker, by
you were the number one, regular season team too.
Hey, well, I've got a picture of Kelce.
And then you've got the Eagles because everyone has to have someone who sucks.
No, the Eagles have been awesome. I just had them last week, scored 16
Yeah, they scored
points.
16 points last week.
Although what's funny is I had the Miami Dolphins on the bench and they scored like 23 or something. So it's an embarrassment of riches between the Eagles and the Dolphins defenses.
And unfortunately, you can only start so many guys.
But yeah, Ogunbowale I think has a good chance of doing really well, but he's on the Jaguars, just like you said.
Yeah. So that chance is limited by the fact that he's on the Jaguars.
Yeah.
You got Rex Burkhead, Sexy Rexy in Houston. Last week he went off against the Chargers, 22 carries, 149 yards, 2 touchdowns.
What a game.
It was like he was back in New England when he would do that once a year. And now he's on Houston, and there's no one else to give the ball to. So he might do this twice a year. However, they're playing the 49ers. The 49ers have been stout on run defense lately. They have not given up double digits to points to any running backs over the last 3 weeks.
And it's not going to start with Burkhead.
Probably not. If he scores a touchdown, he'll get double digits, but that's it.
Well, he'll get volume, right?
He'll get volume. He gets tons of volume.
Which is important.
So it's a dart throw, but it's a good dart throw because he gets high. His volume is basically guaranteed. A guy whose volume is not guaranteed, Derek Gore, running back for Kansas City. He looks really good when he's on the field. Last week, he played the Steelers, and he was used in big chunks. I found this interesting. His 15 touches were split like this. He had 5 in a row, then 4 in a row, then 3 out of 4 plays, and then 3 in a row. So it's not like he's peppered in there. When he's in the game, they give him the ball.
But keep in mind, and I'll let you continue, of course, but the Steelers have let a lot of running backs run against them for high yardage this year because they have missing pieces in the defensive line.
Right. And Kansas City this week are playing the Bengals, so that's going to be an interesting matchup. It will probably be close. So anyways, Gore has a minimum of 10.8 points per game when he touches the ball at least 10 times. He's averaging 12.9 points over those games. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a collarbone injury last week. The x-rays were negative. However, he's not going to be playing this week. He's not expected to play anyways. So you can expect a split with Darrell Williams and Derek Gore. This is a situation where it's a good idea to pick up Gore.
They're both flexible players, I think.
I think that's right. And then a guy who you may want to slot in to start, Boston Scott. So you also need to consider Jordan Howard here for the Eagles because Miles Sanders is out with a hand injury. It's up to Howard and Scott to handle the load. Of course, Jalen Hurts is going to run the ball a lot because that's what he does. But it's interesting because Howard didn't practice on Wednesday. He's got his own injury issues. So if Howard doesn't play, Boston Scott is going to be a featured running back that is available to pick up on the waiver wire right now. So the Eagles play Washington. They've given up 3 15-plus point games in the last 4 weeks to opposing running backs. They obviously sort of melted down last week. So you have to ask yourself, are they going to be able to regroup, or is it the end of the year for them?
The way that I look at the depth chart for the Eagles running backs goes Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard, Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell. But you have to remember that Jordan Howard's out because he got a stinger. And a stinger is what he had 2 or 3 years ago that kept Jordan Howard out for like 4 games.
Oh, wow.
So it's possible that he has the same kind of problem.
Sounds like a murder hornet or something.
Well, they call them stingers, but really they're just like intense bone bruising and like
a super bad contusion.
Yeah. So if Jordan Howard can't play, I totally agree. Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell will get the smaller percentage of the touches. But if Jordan Howard can play, he's been the guy who is taking the majority of the short yardage rushing. Which is great for that team because the Eagles have actually been playing well over the past couple weeks. We'll see what happens there, but this is such a toss-up. I hope that your championship doesn't come down to deciding which Eagles running back that maybe you should play.
Backup Eagles running back.
CJ Uzomah, tight end Cincinnati. It's been a long time. It's been 8 games since Uzomah has scored a touchdown, but he has an extremely consistent amount of targets. That's more than 4 per game over that same stretch of time over those 8 games. And he has a red-hot Joe Burrow throwing him the ball. So if you have to play Uzomah, expect no more than 5 to 6 fantasy points. I'm just being honest, because he's not going to score a touchdown statistically. Although it may seem like a decent matchup and Uzomah may seem to be due for a touchdown, none of that is true. None of that is ever true. So
Being due.
Just because
Not true.
You think that this guy, who by the way is on a whole bunch of fantasy sites right now saying you should start him for week 17 for your championship week because he's going to score a touchdown for the first time. Now, I'm not here saying he's not going to score a touchdown, but statistically, he's not going to score a touchdown.
That's very true.
So he's not a recommended play by Jason and me.
Kansas City Chiefs, the last time they gave up double-digit points to Ricky Seals-Jones was 13.8 points. They've given up 3 touchdowns since then, and none of those guys topped 27 yards.
Trey Lance, quarterback for San Francisco. We talked about him earlier when we were talking in the news segment. And after Garoppolo's right thumb sprain, it doesn't look like he'll suit up for the Week 17 matchup against the Texans. Now, this makes room for the 49ers rookie quarterback Trey Lance to make his second start this season in the NFL. In his first start at Arizona in Week 5, Lance had 192 yards passing. But the far more interesting stat was the 89 yards rushing that he racked up during that game. This dynamic quarterback is going to continue to do that kind of thing during the game. Scoring 15.58 fantasy points despite not scoring any touchdowns in the day says a lot for his fantasy floor. The other relevant game to talk about was in Week 4 versus Seattle. He played in relief of Garoppolo there when Garoppolo went out, put up 2 passing touchdowns and 41 rushing yards, scoring 20.38 fantasy points in the second half. The second half, Jason, 20-plus points in the second half.
That's a lot of points.
The Texans are giving up the 12th most points to opposing quarterbacks with 18.4 per game. I would wager, because of his rushing prowess and dynamic abilities, that Lance outscores that projection in this one. Therefore, I would consider Lance to be a quarterback that you could start in the championship game. And right now I have him as a number 13 quarterback between Kirk Cousins and Ryan Tannehill.
I was just going to ask you, would you start him over Kirk Cousins?
I would not start him over
You've
Kirk
got Cousins just above him.
But you have to understand that in general, a running quarterback makes more sense to start in fantasy games. The only reason why he's 13 right now is because I don't have a whole lot of trust in Trey Lance as a rookie.
Yeah.
But he has started a game. He's come in relief in a couple of games. And it looks to me like that 49ers offense with Samuel, with Mitchell, with Kittle, they're flush with offensive opportunities. And Trey Lance is in a really good position to show why he is the quarterback of the future in San Francisco. And so I think he could be a top 7-8 quarterback this week, and he may inch up in the rankings as we get closer to Sunday.
All right.
So to answer your question, right now, I would not start Lance over Cousins. But on Saturday, maybe he'll be like
change.
number 11 for me.
Yeah.
I just have to watch more tape and I have to get more into it.
Okay.
Do you like Trey Lance, or is he not like a possibility for you right now? So you're not paying that much attention?
No, I put in some claims for him this week.
Yeah.
He's like an on the radar guy. Like, I put in claims thinking I can start him in an emergency. I don't want to start him over the guys I have, but if, somebody's out with COVID or whatever, then I can throw him in there and it's better than what I'm going to find on the wire on Sunday morning.
Okay.
So Trey Lance, I think that the one thing that Kyle Shanahan is really great at is designing an offense to work with the tools that he has on the team. And they're playing the Texans, and they're going to run the ball a hell of a lot. And if they're going to do designed runs for Trey Lance, which they do a lot of them. In fact, I saw a stat earlier this year that said, Trey Lance had more designed runs for him than Justin Fields throughout, the course of the season. And that was, because they don't run the ball on purpose with Justin Fields, but they do with Trey Lance. So they're going to run the ball a lot with him on purpose. It's not just going to be scramble drill stuff.
You mean because one has a coach and a football team, and the other one is a Chicago Bear?
Yes, that's precisely what I'm getting at.
Got it.
Without, alienating all of my Chicago friends.
But both of them have similar skill sets when you're talking about being a dynamic football player, at least how they're supposed to be.
I believe they do. And you know what? Justin Fields might even be a better passer. But I don't know much about either of them because they've either not played or not been used correctly.
Yeah. So we'll see, because it looks like it is going to be a game where Lance gets to showcase his talents. And if he plays well here, he may well just continue that into the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't see, obviously against Houston, that's kind of an easier matchup. But if he plays really well and Garoppolo's not 100%, he'll start again next week. And if they make the playoffs, then it's a huge decision that they have to make. Do you go back to the guy that got you there, or do you go with the hot hand?
Yeah.
That's tough. I don't get paid enough to make that decision. All right.
The sound of an endless love growing inside an infinity of island universes, allowing all causality to dream.
All right, coming up, some audience comments and questions. We're going to go over those and then wrap up this thing, and everyone can get to their final lineup tinkering before the big game.
Oh, there's going to be plenty of tinkering all week long.
Be careful with tinkering.
So, we always say that. Don't tinker. Don't make last-minute decisions on Sunday morning. Stuff like that. I do have to say, though, that anecdotally, one year in the championship, I had to pick up Kellen Moore and start him on Sunday morning, and I won that game because Kellen Moore scored -2 points in the first quarter or first half, something like that, and finished the game with 24 points.
There you go.
You
can fumble and still win at the end.
It was a fantasy football Christmas miracle. Because that weekend used to be on Christmas.
Well, here's some stuff. Pangea45 says, I need to bench one of the following in a half PPR league: Antonio Gibson, Aaron Jones, Cordell Patterson, Deandre Swift. And which one should it be?
I would lean Antonio Gibson here. Deandre Swift is a guy that you mentioned earlier that people are saying don't start him. But Deandre Swift has the juiciest lineup. They're playing the Seahawks. Seahawks are giving up the second most points.
Hey, it's who to bench, not who to start.
I know. What I'm saying is Deandre Swift, I don't want to bench him. So I go Antonio Gibson. Cordell Patterson is the only weapon on that offense, so you got to keep him in. And I don't even know why Aaron Jones is on this list. You start Aaron Jones.
Sounds good. Number 2, Fantasy Sven says, Darren Waller and Myles Gaskin were my two guys I had on many a teams and planted that flag firmly. Clearly things just don't work out sometimes. That's fantasy football for you. And we say, yeah, that's right, Sven.
I rolled with Myles Gaskin in a couple of teams, and I'm not in the championship in either.
Rolling with Gaskin. That's the name of your fantasy team next year.
I hope not. I don't want to do that.
Quoth the Ravens, which is a good name. It's a good name. This Damian Harris Antonio Gibson or Chase Edmonds' decision in my RB2 spot for the championship has me in an absolute pretzel. Any help? So I say, first, untangle yourself, and
these
then
pretzels are making me thirsty.
and then decide on Harris, Gibson, or Edmonds. Now, we had just talked about how Gibson might be a little bit lower on the totem pole, and I think that's true here too. I think Gibson is the odd man out here. Edmonds and Harris are better plays.
Yeah, and Harris, New England back, you never know who the hell they're going to go with.
Yeah.
I like, if there's no James Conner, Edmonds easily here.
Yeah.
And if there is a James Conner, then you got to flip between Harris and Edmonds.
I'm not going to read the name of this commenter, but let's start with SBD. In a PPR league for running back, he has Burkhead, Boston Scott, or Ogunbowale. So, Jason, I'll leave this up to you. Based on our decision, Burkhead, Scott, or Ogunbowale.
Wow, we talked about all three of these guys.
Totally.
Way to place this one there, Dave.
I didn't place it. It's just a question.
So if there's no one else playing, as in like Howard, certainly Sanders, then I would go with Scott here. Otherwise, I would go with Ogunbowale over Burkhead. That sounded like a question. I meant it to be a statement. I would go with Daria Ogunbowale.
And I agree.
Okay.
So if Jordan Howard's not playing and it's just Scott, then Scott, I think, elevates himself to the top. Otherwise, it's going to be Ogunbowale.
And then at tight end, he wants to know Hunter Henry or Gerald Everett. Another well-placed question that we already discussed.
It wasn't placed.
No, this was... I'm going to destroy everything on the last show.
This was actually your exact question. We already covered it.
It totally was.
So I say Henry. Jason wants to find a reason to play Everett.
No, I really don't. I don't want to start a tight end from Seattle that's not named Jimmy Graham.
Seattle offense for the win.
I mean, that's the Rashad Penny thing going on. So,
well, Seattle's a running team now, so at least you know that's going to happen.
They've always been a running team, Dave.
Yeah.
Give me Hunter Henry or give me death.
Not in the beginning of the year when Russell Wilson is healthy.
Yeah.
That's just Russell Wilson's team.
Dave, I want to know, what's your most clever fantasy team name this year?
I like Kelsey Grammer. That's my favorite.
That's a good one. And you've got, the picture of...
Well, I have Kelsey Grammer, who is in
Kelsey
Travis Kelce jersey.
Oh, nice. There's a little Photoshop job by you?
Yeah, a little Photoshop.
Nice. Very nice.
Kelsey Grammer is my favorite and probably my best team, to be fair.
I've got Peyton's Hill to Die On, which is a leftover from last year when he was starting, when it was thought that he would start him over Drew Brees. So it really seemed very apt, but I kept it because it still works. And it's the guy looking back meme. He's walking with his girlfriend and he looks back at another girl. That's Drew Brees is the existing girlfriend, and
Well, the great thing
Sean
about
Payton is the guy.
The great thing about having such a humorous fantasy team name is that even after you lose, you can still look back and then chuckle mildly at your past transgressions in fantasy.
Yes. And last year was the whole Taysom Hill isn't a wide receiver, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
Or running back, or whatever the hell he was. Where's our next question?
Mr. Tolley says,
okay,
I have a four-headed monster at running back this week in my fantasy football championship, and which of these three are you starting? So, non-PPR, you have to do three of Sony Michel, Aaron Jones, Zeke, and Harris. It's funny because, like all of these, some of them have come across in our own decisions, and you'll notice that happens with any championship lineup questions, that there's always going to be
a lot of the same players that make
a theme of players.
Yeah. Well, nobody's asking us if they should start Cooper Kupp or not.
No.
But I bet a lot of people have Cooper Kupp.
So in a standard scoring league, do you start Michelle, Jones, Zeke, and Harris? And you want three of those. So basically you're just looking for one of them to sit.
Yes. I would sit Damian Harris. Michelle and Aaron Jones are easy. So the decision here is between Zeke and Damian Harris.
I sit Zeke.
Yeah. Harris has been good. It's hard to...
But again...
This one's tough.
We were talking about New England running backs, But yeah, I sit Zeke. I just don't trust Zeke in his split carries in that particular offense. I feel like Prescott is doing well. I don't know. I don't trust Zeke in Week 17. But it's obviously a coin flip between Jason and I. So we'll go with your gut.
Go with your favorite.
And Jason, why don't you read us our last two? We have two more questions.
FF Stream TTV
Yes.
wants to know, do not fall for the trap. Jared Goff possibly not starting for Detroit. Do not start the Seahawks defense special teams in this week in fantasy. What he's saying is that Detroit is going to rise from the ashes like a phoenix and smash the lowly Seattle Seahawks.
Well, we already know that Amon-Ra has done well regardless of his quarterback.
He's like a top 5 wide receiver the last, 5 weeks.
And Josh Reynolds is also doing well there. They don't need T.J. Hawkinson. They don't need running backs. It doesn't matter. Detroit will just suddenly do well for no reason.
That's very Detroit of them.
Do you know what? I think I don't know if it was the coach who said this or someone else in the organization, but somebody said, and maybe you can back me up on this or look it up.
I think I know what you're getting at.
But somebody said we're going to shut down Deandre Swift right after we play.
Right after we play Green Bay.
Right after we play Green Bay.
Which is their Week 18 opponent.
Exactly.
Yes.
It was, okay.
And they also asked Dan Campbell if he would play tight end if they were short. And he said, probably not. I think I would leave a kneecap on the field.
Yeah. I think so,
and
too.
maybe an ankle. So I like what's going on in Detroit this week. I am not disagreeing with you, Mr. FF Stream TTV. That being said, I'm still going to start Rashad Penny. But that has nothing to do with what you had to share with us here.
Yeah,
which was
just that Detroit will probably score more points than you think they should.
That's so very Detroit of them.
I don't know. Like, they're not going to win any games, and then they're just going to win a bunch at the end for no reason.
No, I mean, Seattle just lost to Chicago. They're not going to, they might.
Oh, Seattle.
They're talking about, not they, but, the fans in Seattle are like, we need to get rid of Pete Carroll.
What are they going to do?
I have no idea. If they get rid of Pete Carroll, he's going to be hired the next day by another team.
Yep.
And then Ron654, which tight end to start this week? Half PPR. Uzoma versus Kansas City, Kmet versus the Giants, or Everett versus Detroit. I think that matchup for Kmet is incorrect.
Kmet is playing the Giants.
Oh, the Giants are playing the Bears.
Yeah.
I thought that was next week. And then, what do we like here? Uzoma, you just mentioned. He's getting how many points this week? 5 or 6?
Yeah, 5 or 6.
And that's it.
5 or 6 fantasy points.
Cole Kmet, I don't know what to say about Kmet. He's a solid tight end too. So you got to go Gerald Everett.
I agree, Everett. And the other guys are great tight ends. They're not scoring points because they're not getting touchdowns. And if you want to go for Everett, then you're looking at a guy who occasionally scores a touchdown, which in weeks 12 and week 16 he had in a half PPR league 12 and 15 points respectively.
Okay.
Just don't even look at his -1 versus San Francisco.
He got a catch, he fumbled it, and they didn't go to him again.
No, but
rough.
if you average his points, then Everett is clearly doing better than either Kmet or Uzoma over the past several weeks. And that's what we're looking for, is the possibility of doing well. And I like it. Now, I'm looking right now at Fantasy Pros at the Gerald Everett little scorecard that shows his game lineup. And according to Fantasy Pros, from weeks 1 through 8, he had a lot of bad matchups. Tennessee, Minnesota, the Rams, Pittsburgh, and New Orleans, all of whom are pretty good against tight ends. And in the last half of the season, he scored more points and had better matchups. Now, going up against Detroit in week 17, not a bad matchup.
Yeah.
So I don't mind Everett here. But as we said before, he's not a TE1. He's probably the best TE2 that you could start on your team.
Yeah, so recently, last week, the Lions gave up 13.2 to Kyle Pitts. The week before, 10.4 to Zach Ertz. In week 14, Albert, oh, God, I'm not going to get that one. 12.6 points. Okwubengbom? Oh, that was properly butchered. I apologize to Albert. And, week 12, 10.4 to Jimmy Graham, and 10.5 to Cole Kmet. So, definitely Detroit.
Here we go. That's a long drawn out. Okwegbunam.
Okay, it's pronounced like it's spelled, of course.
We are now a pronunciation podcast.
Okwegbunam.
You have to say things slowly if you are a pronunciation podcast.
Mariota.
Albert Okwegbunam. Okwegbunam.
Tungvailoa.
Tungvailoa.
Yes. You just need to lower your voice a little bit.
At least I know how to
Say
pronounce
it slowly.
Tungvailoa.
Yeah, because we've had to say it like almost every week.
Yeah, but still, there are people who are getting paid millions of dollars, maybe not millions, but hundreds of thousands of dollars to announce his name and say it incorrectly. So there's that. Anyway, I really want to thank everybody. I have to say, if there are any questions in the chat room, please go ahead and ask us right now. It looks like one might be coming in.
Yes, it's a DFS question.
And DFS is fine.
We don't play DFS just as a disclaimer, but we'll do our best.
And so let's go ahead and answer this one particular question. And to Jason's point, I have won money at DFS. I don't play it
On a regular
religiously.
basis. Sure. Okay, so Dak Prescott is $6,700. Justin Herbert is $6,800, and Joe Burrows is $6,900. So our matchups are as follows. Mr. Burrows plays the Chiefs, and...
This is a question I can answer pretty easily, I think.
Oh, really? Are you going to lean Justin Herbert here? They play the Broncos. The Broncos are good defense.
So Dak and Burrow are expensive because they did well last week, and because DFS is a don't forget what you did last week kind of a situation.
Okay.
Because most of the players that play DFS have very short memories.
That's the whole point of DFS, I think.
Herbert is a quarterback that has been over the year better than both of them, and I would start Herbert versus Denver in a heartbeat over Dak Prescott and Joe Burrow's matchups.
Denver Broncos giving up the third fewest points to opposing quarterbacks. However, Arizona Cardinals giving up the fifth fewest points to opposing quarterbacks. Detroit Lions giving up... Oh, no, that's not
Kansas City.
The matchup.
Kansas City
giving up the fourth most points.
Look, this is
opposing
people
quarterbacks.
expecting Joe Burrow to have like 500 yards game after game as a new quarterback in the league is realistically out of touch.
I like where you're going here. As far as value goes, and that's what we're not just picking the players, we also need to take into account the cost. Justin Herbert should be much more expensive than these two because he is a better quarterback. So I like Justin Herbert there. And then you've got Devontae Adams versus Minnesota, Diggs versus Atlanta, Chase versus Kansas City, Debo versus Houston, Kupp versus Baltimore. Pick 2 or 3. Well, certainly Devontae Adams and Cooper Kupp.
Pick 2 or 3.
Those are the two that I pick, and Debo Samuel. Because that's just...
Adams, Kupp, and Samuel are clearly the top 3. Now, that is Kupp, Adams, Samuel, according to my ratings this particular week.
Fine. I mean, you might want to argue Adams, Kupp, Samuel, just because you like alphabetical order.
Yeah, there's no reason to argue between two amazing cups of hot chocolate.
Great episode of 99% Invisible I just listened to about alphabetical order.
Put the little marshmallows in it and call it a day.
Okay. Javonte Williams versus the Chargers. David Montgomery versus the Giants. Josh
we're doing
Jacobs
the whole lineup.
versus Indy. Right. Joe Mixon versus Kansas City.
I didn't realize.
Zeke versus Arizona. Pick 2. So, Dave, you said Mr. Montgomery is a top 10 guy. They are playing the Giants. Fine by me. And I would go with Joe Mixon as well. So Montgomery and Mixon are my choices there.
Yep. Monty and Mixon.
Keep it rolling if you got it, Mike. We're here for another...
Well, that sounds like the DFS lineup.
I mean, I guess there's a tight end coming in a moment.
Well, we know what to do. We are going to suggest that you play Hunter Henry over Gerald Everett.
No, but he's going to be like, should I play Travis Kelce or, I don't know, George Kittle or Mark Andrews?
Why don't you wrap us up, Jay?
Well, I would go with Travis Kelce in that situation. Oh, Dawson Knox or Gesicki.
Oh, my.
Ugh. This isn't as fun of a choice as I thought it would be.
This is an easy choice.
It's
Dawson
Mike
Knox
Gesicki.
has been tearing it up.
Has he?
You're insane. Do you have no Knox on any of your fantasy teams?
No.
Dawson Knox has been one of the arguably best tight ends of the entire year. And so there's no doubt.
Has he?
No doubt it's Dawson
How
Knox.
have I not been at all aware of this? I look at this shit all the time.
I have no idea. None at all.
Dawson Knox is the number 6 tight end on the year. Okay, yeah, Dawson Knox.
Yes.
No more arguments.
Well, he's also playing against Atlanta. And Dawson Knox is going to be open all the time.
I mean, not everybody can catch every pass on every play for Buffalo.
All right. Well, I hope that
But yeah,
lineup.
Gesicki struggled to get like 5 points last week, so
I hope that lineup works out for you.
Knox is a good start.
And if it does, then we expect you to send the money to P.O. Box 6478.
Care of drinkfive.com.
That's right. To the Studio 265 in Chicago, Illinois. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening this year. Thanks for listening tonight. We will have some random shows throughout the year. We'll have more content on our website as well. So please don't be a stranger. Hit us up on Twitter. Email us, jason@drinkfive.com or dave@drinkfive.com. And just to answer one last question, start Saquon Barkley because the Bears are terrible. Drink 5, Dave. Cheers. Good luck this week.